Hi and welcome to Cherry Pie Math. Today we're going to be learning about proper, improper, and mixed fractions, which are really just the three forms of fractions that you can have. So to start with, we're actually going to think about when you're baking, and often when you're baking you'll see instructions that say like have 2.5 cups of flour. So I want you to pause the video and think if you had 2.5 cups that you needed to put in, but all you had was a half cup measuring spoon, like see that half cup there, how would you do that? How many times would you have to use the measuring cup? So you probably came up with about 5 times, right? Because for each 1 cup, that's really equal to 2 half cups. And so you would have to do that twice. So you'd have 2, 2, and then 1 more half, and you'd end up with 5 times using that half cup. And that's how mixed fractions are made. They're basically just saying how many times do you use like the basic measuring cup to fill the requirement, I guess. So just to review, what's a fraction? A fraction is telling you how much of a whole. So for example, if you say 1/3, that's really just saying if you had 3 pieces like that, it's one of those pieces. So the two parts of the fraction is the numerator and the denominator. The denominator tells you how many pieces are in the whole, so how many times you're going to divide that like block up, like in this case it was 3. And then this top part, the numerator, tells you how many of those pieces you're using. So if I was to model 2 1/3 in visual form, and we'll just say each of these is going to be 1 piece, so this is 1 whole, this is 1 whole, and this is 1 whole. 2 1/3 would be, we'd have 2 wholes like this, and then that takes care of the 2, and then we still have to do 1/3, so I'd divide this last one into 3 parts, and I would just have this part. When I say number of pieces, I mean how many pieces of the same size. So the smallest possible size we can have is this third. So if I divide the rest of them into 3 pieces, then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces, and the size of the piece is 1/3. And that's going to be helpful when we're thinking about how we're going to be making mixed fractions from improper fractions. So I've been using a lot of words like improper, denominator, etc., mixed fractions. So let's go through what each part of a fraction is. So the denominator tells us the number of pieces. So like 1/3 means that there's 3 pieces in a whole, for example. Mixed fractions, which look like 2 1/3, they have like the really big number and then the fraction next to it, and it tells us how many wholes there are and leftover pieces there are. So in this case, I'd have 2 whole pieces and then 1 leftover piece. And we saw that in the example we just did. Improper fractions tells us how many pieces there are of that side. So if I was to go back here, I had 7 pieces. My improper fraction would be 7/3 because there are 7 pieces that are of the size 1/3. And proper fractions are just improper fractions that never made it to a whole. So for example, 1/3 is a proper fraction because there's just not enough of them to make an entire whole. This one is improper because 3 fits into 7 twice. So there was enough pieces to make it to 1 whole. Remember, a whole is 1, or it's the same number over itself. So for example, like 3/3 would be 1 whole. Okay, so pause the video, make sure you understand all those words, and then we're going to be talking about how to go in between the 2 forms. So just really quick, here's another example. We have 2/5. That's really all it is. So if I had, this tells me again, the denominator tells me how many pieces there are. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's 5 pieces, and then it would be 2 of those pieces. That is 2/5. 13/4 means that each whole has 4 pieces. So I'm going to make a couple of them. So here's a bunch of wholes that have been divided into 4 parts. And 13/4 means that I need 13. So there's 4, here's 8, here's 12, and here's 1 extra. So it's saying I have 13 pieces of the same size of 1/4. Similarly, let's say I have 3 1/4. This says that I have 3 wholes, so I'm going to have 3 wholes like that. And then I have 1/4 extra. So then this last one I'm going to divide into 4 parts, and I have that 1 extra slice, that's 1/4. As you can see, both of these show exactly the same amount. They are all both 3 wholes and 1/4 extra. It's just the format of it. Sometimes we want improper fractions and sometimes we want mixed fractions. So I want you to pause it and practice and identify which one is a proper fraction, a mixed fraction, or improper fraction. So go ahead and pause. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you paused it, and I'll just go through them really quick. So this is mixed, this is improper, this is proper because it's less. I guess the easiest way to tell is if this number is less than this number, then it's proper. Otherwise, it's improper. Mixed, mixed, improper, proper, mixed, improper. This is actually just equal to 2 because 2 divided by 1 is just 2. And this is proper. Okay, so to go from mixed fractions to improper fractions, you need to figure out how many pieces are in one whole. And then you can tell that by the denominator. So first, you want to identify the number of wholes. And in this case, there are 6 wholes in 6 2/5. Second, you're going to multiply the number of wholes. I should have written this smaller. I'm going to write this smaller. Sorry, guys. To multiply number of wholes by the denominator. So I would do 6 times 5 is equal to 30. Third step is to add leftovers. So you would do like 30 plus 2. That's the leftover is up there. So that equals 32. And then you would write your improper fraction. Write improper fraction. And you would use the original denominator. So 32 would go on the top. Whatever you just got would be right there. And then you would put 5 on the bottom. And that's all it is. So the biggest trick is do this times this, add this. So multiply, add, and then just remember you have the same denominator. Okay, to go from improper fractions to mixed fractions, you need to figure out how many wholes can be made out of the number of pieces we have. So 1, you're going to divide top by bottom or numerator by denominator, depends how mathematical you want to write it. So in this case, I would do 32 divided by 5. That's equal to 6 with remainder of 2. So then I would write the mixed fraction. And the 6 becomes our big number. The leftover goes on top, and the original denominator goes on the bottom. So as you can see, it's exactly the same. We're just going back and forth. So you basically see how many times does 5 fit into the 32, and then you just put the leftovers on top there. So food for thought, I'm not going to go over this because I want you to think about it. When would we want to use improper fractions, and when would we want to use mixed fractions, and why? You're going to see both of them when you go throughout your life. So just think about when you would use mixed fractions and improper fractions. So some things to remember: improper and mixed fractions can represent the same quantity. They are just written two different ways, and we saw that in the picture that we drew. Mixed fractions can show us how many wholes and leftovers there are, whereas improper fractions show us how many pieces there are, and each of them has a place and a use. So like mixed fractions we'll often see in baking because it tells us like how many wholes there are, but improper fractions are really good when you're like trying to share like a pizza, for example. And you want to count the number of pieces. So I hope that helps, and good luck.